Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves. I want to welcome you guys. Nick, I love the background, the dandelions. Quick story for anybody that knew Jeannie Pattison, who is a wonderful breeder of African gray parrots. Jeannie, I heard a story once that Jeannie jumped over a fence on the side of the road in a dress to pick dandelions for her birds because they're so good for birds, and she thought that was important that she did that. So hey, Melissa made it. Woohoo! Lots going on these days. We've got American Federation of Aviculture Legislative Awareness Tour tomorrow in Mesa. The AFA committee will be presenting at the Arizona Bird Store from 6 to 8, I believe. I'm not sure that time is correct, but the team will be in Raleigh, North Carolina on May 23rd. We're doing one from 10:30 to 11:30 at the Raleigh Durham Cage Bird Club or Society bird fair. And on May 30th, we'll be in Ocala, Florida, at the Wings in the Sun Bird Club, presenting there. So lots of mileage. And then in August, in the middle of the Rockstar Tour, we are going to be at the AFA Educational Conference, 52nd Educational Conference from August 5th to the 8th. So that's going on. We also, Rockstar Tour last night, we announced that the Leather Elves are doing double boxes. Well, not double boxes. I shouldn't say that because he'll lose his mind. We're doing they're scrolling across the bottom, the rescues that we'll be visiting. But we are also doing, for every order that's placed for a rescue box through the Leather Elves, we will be matching that with gift certificates that can be used later on. So support your favorite rescue, the favorite tour rescue that's on the list. We also need to thank some of our sponsors. This is a lot. We've got, the great sponsors, A&E, who supports us every year, Harrison's, Aronico, Celti is sponsoring this year. Beaktivity is doing gift certificates for the all the rescues. So, and I know I'm missing people, but I promise there'll be more information. But lots and lots of great donations going out. And if you can support us with some purchases through the Leather Elves for rescue boxes, that would be great. And we will be, for all intents and purposes, doubling them with gift certificates. So I don't think I missed anything else. But this is part two. I am happy to have back with me Jack Pine from High Redbird. Hey, Jack, how's it going?
Hey there, Robin. Yeah, I'm excited we have part two because I am long-winded and we ran up the first session into where we needed two sessions. Um, okay, let me make sure I am actually working out of my friend Danny's office right now because I had to help him with something, and I am on a completely different computer. I do not know where his camera and stuff is. So I feel like this is just a good representation, like working with animals. Not all enrichment is positive. Sometimes enrichment might be a little bit stressful. And just because it's a little bit stressful, that doesn't mean that it isn't mentally stimulating or good for you. So
And
if I'm looking
sometimes
on, that's why.
you have to work with animals that are not always ready for the training session. What? And but they adapt, and you have to be aware. You pick up on the cues. You see, what their level is before you move on. So, Jack, what's been going on with High Redbird?
I have been posting for a lot of people may not be aware. I have actually transitioned to High Redbird, and the things that I do through High Redbird is now my full time what I do. So on one side, yeah, on the other side, yeah. Um, I am sure Robin can uh, help attest to all of the joys and challenges of small business ownership. Um, it's a lot of fun because the reason that I started doing it was I wanted to do the kind of presentations that I wanted to see for a lot of schools, libraries, daycares, they don't have the same access to being able to see and interact with animals that, used to be available. I think every school used to have, oh, there's a couple of times a year someone's just going to come out with birds or big snakes and now that's not as readily available. So I'm able to do that with the educational components that are really important to me. I get to vary the offerings that I get to do. So we do programs for schools, libraries, daycares, but things like senior centers, memory care, we get to do a lot of really cool programs for that as well. And, there's not an age limit to liking animals, to wanting to know more about animals. So I think it's a really, really cool and exciting thing. So if you guys want to follow on any of the High Red Bird pages, we are on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. You can follow along, see how that's going. If you are interested in a program, we do programs. We do travel for programs. So completely open for that.
I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
Do you like ramen noodles? Asking. So, I just as a small business owner, sometimes that's what happens, Jack. But I am sure you are going to be on filet mignon soon, much sooner than you get stuck on ramen. So,
I bought the bulk pack
we
from Costco today.
there it is. There it is. And so you guys out there that think, we're all living the high life because we own our own business. Yeah, not so much. But ramen is good. You can do a lot of things with it. So good luck with that. Melissa says good luck too. So last time we talked, there was a lot of discussion about how training makes life better with an animal, how it can improve your relationship. We didn't do a lot of definitions. And maybe I think if everybody's up for that, I think that's where we should kind of start tonight with some terminology. So we'll start off small. Approximations. See what I did there?
Okay. I feel like I made a similar joke the last time and you got kind of mad at me.
So, all right. Book definition of an approximation, Jack.
I mean, so approximations are just the small steps that make up a completed behavior. And you are able to divide a behavior into as many approximations as you want, as small of approximations as you want. So, everyone thinks about you go to see animal shows and you see animals that do all these ridiculous things. They fly from one spot to the other. Well, birds fly from one spot to the other. If you see an elephant do that's a completely different story. But maybe they pick things up. Maybe they paint a picture, and you don't jump to automatically having that fully completed behavior. There's going to be little steps, little tweaks that you make. People do that with every single animal. If you start with a brand new animal, it doesn't start with going into its crate when it's cued. Maybe it starts with looking at its crate and then taking a step towards its crate and then going to the doorway. All of those are going to be approximations, just like those little steps that make up your ideal finished behavior.
And I think too, for me, approximations go with expectations. So if you have this expectation that you're going to get the whole behavior all in one, with some animals you might. Okay, it's rare, but you might. And so you got to kind of take it, and your expectations might need to be a little bit smaller. It might be, even for like a step up. Okay, sometimes just that lifting the foot. Okay, let's go even smaller. Just looking at your hand or looking at the stick that you're asking for step up. That you as a trainer need to realize that your expectations are going to be dictated or should be dictated by what you're seeing from the animal.
And I think it's really important to also recognize that, yes, you're going to be working on those approximations step after step after step. And there may be times where you need to go back a few steps. Maybe something happened. It's one thing to go into the crate when everything's perfect. It's another thing to go into the crate when it's a different time of day, or you're not as hungry, or hey, there's tornado sirens blaring and you need to get into the crate. Well, that's a lot scarier. It's also a known thing that sometimes you are going to do a training session with your animal and they have been doing a behavior wonderfully again and again and again. And then I don't even know what that is. I've never seen a crate before in my life. What do you want me to do with this? And you are going to feel like you are going insane. But that is a known, documented. That is how your animal learns. Like they're processing, they're learning things, they're getting used to things. They may backtrack a little bit, as long as you pay attention to that overall trend. If you're trending in the direction that you want, we have bad days. Sometimes our animals have bad days. We have lazy days. Sometimes our animals have lazy days. And then some days, I've had days where I don't know what happens. I wake up first thing in the morning. I'm like, well, we're going to detail clean the entire house. And I have half the house done by 11 a.m. And sometimes your animals do the same thing where they're like, no, I am ready to learn and work and do things today. And maybe you thought I was going to hit one approximation in this training session. And if you do that, your animal is going to leave you behind. You need to be prepared to, we're hitting step 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all in the same session.
And that, that's why with a training, when you do a training plan, right? You set out your training plan, you've got your approximations, and we're going to get through this one. And then don't hang your animal up on, oh, wait, you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's a fluid, progression, you need to go with it. And you can't, if they skip 1 or 2, that's okay. It's not like, oh, no, 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 I didn't do number 2 to, you have to. I mean, go with what you're seeing, be able to read that. Yeah, Melissa said she's never lazy. She never, or Zorro is never lazy either. So that's approximations, those steps that make up a behavior. Cue. So this is, people get a little bit hung up on this one. I just did. What's your definition of a cue?
I would say a cue is a signal to an animal that reinforcement may be available if a behavior is completed. Cues can be so many different things. They can be verbal cues. So if I ask my bird to step up, I can start with step up, and the bird knows if it steps up, maybe it's going to get a treat. Attention from a person that it likes could be a reinforcer. Maybe I'm not going to use step up as the cue. Maybe I do a presentation of the where's the camera? A presentation of the hand. The bird knows it can step up like that. This is going back to something we talked about last time. Behaviors are anything that your animal does, and a cue is a signal that there's some reinforcer, something that will make them more likely to perform a behavior. So that can be literally anything. If the beep goes off on your microwave, which causes your bird to then make that sound in mimicry, and then you immediately give attention to the bird of like, no, stop it, I'm on the phone or I'm doing things. The bird's getting attention, it's getting reinforcement. So the beep from the microwave has now become a cue for that behavior. But so the cue is just any sort of signal that indicates that reinforcement could be available for a particular behavior.
And I think you've got to be careful if you're using, especially if you're using a visual cue, whether it's a point, whether it's, I've told the story before about working with a pied crow that had a recycling behavior down, like going and picking up a can, dropping it in the bucket. Perfect, right? Spot on every single time. A new trainer came in, and the cue was just a hand signal. It was, this is, and he knew, yep, did it every single time. She was doing it and then dropping her hand down beside her. And he kept going to the ground. And everybody's like, what's going on? Why isn't he doing, he's always been so good at this. And videotape it, oh, look at that, she's dropping her hand, just inadvertently. So if you've got a visual cue, you've got to make sure that you stick with it and you keep it very specific. That it's, you're not adding all kind. And this is a tough one for some of us that talk with our hands.
Yeah, I actually, for the animals that I work with, I have to desensitize them to. I do talk with my hands a lot because not only am I working with an animal, I'm trying to keep the focus of 307-year-olds. So yes, I need to be bigger than life, and I need to be exciting and engaging, and um, I think we also need to address the idea, because this gets asked a lot, of what is the difference between a cue and a command. Because people
Mhm.
always want to ask, like, what's the difference? Like, I use commands for my animal. So, like, Robin, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I look at a cue as a request, that it's the signal, but you're also the animal has been conditioned and learned that it's a request for a specific behavior. So that's how I look at a cue. A command, I don't use that term very often.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that most people use them, I think they kind of mean them interchangeably. Um, Part of the difference, I worked with parrots, I have worked with elephants, I have worked with large hoofstock. I'm
Mhm.
not commanding them to do anything. If you think you're going to command a dromedary camel to do something, or an umbrella cockatoo, you have lost your mind.
Mhm.
Instead, you focus on building that relationship, ensuring that the reinforcement that you have available is appropriate for the behavior you are asking for, setting up your training session so that the animal wants to be engaged. The whole name of the game with animal training is planning for success. So you try to
Mhm.
think through all of those different scenarios and find ways to be successful. You're not going to force your animal to do anything. Ethically, it's problematic to even think about forcing your animal to do things. And I don't think most people mean it that way. I think they're just used to these are the commands that I have for my dog. And it's like, we've moved past it.
And I think, especially with parrots, I don't know about you, but you get, make him talk. Can you make him talk? I can't make him do anything. And Melissa even said Zorro will teach you not to be a hand talker the painful way. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. And I think, if you think of it as a request, and because the next step, your bridge is dependent on your request. So if request, you give that cue, you request a behavior, the next step you're going to take is dependent on whether the animal took that cue or not. So what's your definition of a bridge, Jack?
So a bridge is a signal that pinpoints to an animal the exact moment in behavior that reinforcement can be available. And I think that's the part that's really important. It's that pinpoint aspect.
Mhm.
If you don't have the ability to help your animal hone in on exactly what it is you are looking for, exactly what it is that's going to get reinforcement to be available, you're going to have a much harder time training your animal. Um, I don't think it's as complex as an idea as some people may be led to think. For a lot of us, using a bridge is actually fairly intuitive.
Mhm.
Your animal does something, you say good. There are things that you want to look out for. You want to pay attention to the timing of something. So bridge timing is so incredibly important, and that's actually one of the areas where a lot of new trainers struggle. If I ask a bird to
Mhm.
pick up its foot, and it has set its foot down, by the time I bridge it by saying good, the question then becomes, am I telling the animal that reinforcement is available for picking the foot up or for setting the foot down? And if it's for setting the foot down because I was too late with my bridge, I'm going to have a hard time getting that foot up, getting that foot to stay up in the future. So, again, video recording your training sessions, having another trainer watch your training sessions. I feel like I bring this up every time, but having somebody watch your training sessions is not a mark of failure. It's not a mark of you don't know what you're doing as a trainer. It is how the best trainers in the world, you still get somebody else to watch the trainer because there's
Right.
going to be something else that they may pick up on in the environment or in the animal's body language or in your body language. So,
Mhm.
utilizing that bridge appropriately is really important.
Right. Joyce asked a clicker, right? And you can absolutely you can use your voice, you can use a clicker. I personally don't like to use a clicker because I can't. So especially when you're working with, like a bird on a raptor, for example, on your glove, and then you've got a pouch with your reinforcement, maybe you're tidbitting mice, and so you've got the reinforcer and the clicker. I am not that coordinated, so I prefer to use my voice. But you can absolutely use a clicker, and more power to you, Joyce, if that works for you. Um, a clicker is a little bit easier timing wise, I think, because once you've mastered, how you're going to hold the clicker, how you're going to interact, it's very precise, and it's a very, it's that click, as opposed to a voice, which sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's said, differently. And if you've got multiple trainers working with an animal, then sometimes a clicker is better, because
Um,
you got somebody going good, and then you've got somebody that's like good.
yeah,
Is it the same? Is it the same bridge? That's where we
right.
get in trouble.
And I think that ties into the idea of bridge conditioning. So
Mhm.
it's really important with animal training to recognize the bridge does not inherently have value. It is a secondary or paired reinforcer that develops value because of the work that you put into the animal, pairing it with something that it eagerly wants, usually a food reinforcer. Um, there's pros and cons to every single bridge. I think being perfectly honest, Robin saying she's not coordinated enough for a clicker, that's one thing. But also, a clicker is shiny and it's something else in your hand. So maybe the parrot is more interested in that than a verbal bridge. But at the same time, a clicker is a sound that is almost impossible to replicate if like accidentally. You're not going to accidentally make a click sound. But if your
I
bridge
think
is good and everyone's coming up, who's a good bird, you're
Yeah.
bridging that bird. It's getting no reinforcement, and you're going to be devaluing that bridge.
I remember I was doing some consulting with a couple that had a parrot that was having some behavioral issue or challenges, and I said to them, "Don't use terms that you would commonly use around the house all the time." And they looked so perplexed. And the wife looked at the husband and she goes, "Guacamole." I'm like, "Excuse me, what?" So guacamole was their bridge. I'm like, hey, if you want to go with a multi-syllable bridge, have at it. And it worked for them. It wasn't something that apparently they said all the time at their house. So yeah. So
Well, and
bridges, go ahead.
I was going to say we've covered this again and again and again. We actually were talking about this just before the live stream. Just because something works for the bird down the street doesn't mean it's going to work for your bird. Pick what works for your bird. So if it is a bridge of guacamole, I've also heard pineapple for some reason is a ooh that's a good one. You're not going to accidentally say that. Um, one of my favorites is thank you because I feel like for most people it's a natural like oh you did something I like thank you but you don't just walk up to an animal and say thank you like
Right.
but good
Yeah.
you would so
Karen's reading my mind through the internet. She said a clicker sound is not easily replicated unless you are a gray parrot. I was thinking the exact same thing. And it's true. Yeah, it is true.
well
So, then you've got the gray and reinforcing the macaw and the next case. Yeah, it's all good. So be careful if you're working with multiple birds. So we've got the cue, the animal responds the way you want or what you're hoping for. You bridge that with whether it's a verbal bridge or a click sound, whatever you choose. Next comes the reinforcement. definition of reinforcement, Jack? Jack's like,
Um,
I can't believe you're making me do this.
you're making me go through all of them too. Are we gonna? Do we want to go through all the different aspects, or do we want to just break it down?
Well, just reinforcement to start with, and then we'll break
Okay.
it down into the four.
And I'm going to kind of hint on it, but yeah, we'll go into reinforcement because when a lot of people get started with animal training, I feel like they fall into this trap of I need to fully understand all of these things. And I need to have this definition of positive reinforcement and positive punishment, negative reinforcement, negative punishment. And I have found if you try to remember an exact definition for each of those individual things, you're going to struggle. But if you can have a definition of the ideas of reinforcement versus punishment, positive versus negative, you're going to have a much better time. And reinforcement is just something that increases the likelihood that an animal will perform a particular behavior again. One of the most important things I have to point out there, you're increasing the likelihood of a particular behavior happening again. You can never guarantee that an animal is going to do a particular behavior. It is never going to be 100%. But by building that relationship, using that bridge to effectively communicate with the animal, using an appropriate reinforcer, you can increase the likelihood of that behavior. Another thing that's really important to remember is the animal chooses the reinforcer. You don't. And the reinforcer can be vastly different for different animals. Um, a really good example is something like tactile reinforcement. Animals, there are certain species, dogs really, really like to be scratched behind the ears. Alpacas do not want you to touch them. So scratched behind the ears is not, and alpaca is just my example because alpacas are mean and they spit. But, they don't want you to touch them.
Have you ever worked with a spectacled owl, Jack? Spectacled owls will solicit head scratches. Everyone I
That's
have ever met.
that's just weird because birds of
It
prey in
is.
general don't typically like and that's another thing. Like sometimes it can depend on the relationship. There are some
Mhm.
birds that might view head scratches from somebody they like as reinforcement, but if a stranger comes into their space and tries to scratch their head, they're going to bite them because it's
Yeah.
not reinforcing coming from that person.
And that's so true, and especially if there are multiple people working with an animal in your home or in your work setting, and somebody says, oh yeah, he loves it when I do this and I scritch him on the head, and you're like, oh cool, and you go rushing in there and you're going to script. No, it's probably wait and see, build that relationship first. I feel like, and I'm going to get slammed for this at some point, but I feel like food reinforcers when you're first working with an animal are the best way to go, because as long as that animal is food motivated, then that's the safer way to start, in my opinion.
I'm going to completely agree with you. And I think it's for a couple of different reasons beside the obvious. One, food is a primary reinforcer. Your animal has a biological imperative to want food. So it should be reinforcing on its own. But when you're working with a new animal, when you're building that relationship, one of the things that's really important is to evaluate what is the higher value reinforcer for them? What is something they're going to be really, really excited about? So, usually, when you start working with a new animal, you're going to work on bridge conditioning. So, say I'm using thank you as a bridge for my animal, I'm going to be doing thank you. Here's a reinforcer. Thank you. Here's a reinforcer. And pairing that reinforcer with thank you. So, thank you means something. I'm going to be trying out different reinforcers, which means my animal's getting enrichment, they're getting different reinforcers that they can assess. I am going to be observing them to see what is their favorite reinforcer. I'm going to be observing them to see things like their body language. So I'm going to be in a better place to receive the signals that they are offering me as well. So I completely agree. For like 10 different reasons, starting with food reinforcers is a wonderful way to start with your animal. I feel like I get slammed for it because when it comes to new parrots, I am a very, very strong proponent of start off with protected contact training sessions because, again, it's not stressful to your animal. It gives you time to build that relationship, learn their body language. The bird's not scared. You're going to grab them. You're going to be less concerned that you're going to get bit. Everyone's
Mhm.
going to have a better time.
There's more focus that way. I feel like and a lot of people do get upset. Oh no, not protected contact. They shouldn't be in the cage, blah, blah, blah. Well, if it's a matter of lowering the stress level on you and the animal, there's more focus. If because then all you have to focus on is what are you asking for? How are you bridging at the right time? And what we didn't talk about with bridging is we talked about timing, but you also want to make sure that you're not you have to decide what the criteria is for that bridge. So am I bridging, which goes back to approximations. I mean, it all goes together. And the approximation, is it the one that you were looking for, or is it a piece of that? And are you satisfied with that? Have you satisfied the criteria that you're looking for so that you bridge? Does that make sense?
Do I have do I have to define criteria now?
No. No.
Do you want to define criteria now?
You can do it if you'd like. Go ahead. I'll just sit quietly.
um, no, just because we hadn't covered that yet, but that is a
Mhm.
really important part too, and that ties into the approximations. Um, and again, there's like ridiculous definitions you can find. Behavioral criteria is just what do you want that behavior to look like, and trying to think through every possible thing. So if I ask a bird to wave, is it okay? The bird picks its foot up. I'm like, great, that's a pretty lax criteria. That's going to be a lot easier to hit. If the criteria is the bird picks up its left foot, if the criteria is the bird picks up its left foot to the point that it is level with its beak and holds it steady for at least 3 seconds, and all of those are approximations. And maybe we start with a shift of the weight to a pickup of the left foot. So behavioral criteria can change, especially if you are in a stressful situation. You're at a point where you're not hitting the approximations that you want. Your animal has completely forgotten it did any training. Maybe that's the point where you relax the criteria a little bit to see can we end on a win?
Mhm.
Because you know we don't like feeling like we failed. Our animals don't like feeling like they failed. Again, planning and setting them up for success is important, but just what does that behavior look like to you? And since we've been talking about it, if there are multiple trainers, if there are multiple family members working with that bird, making sure that you are all on the same page because that bird is going to do that behavior to the criteria established by the weakest trainer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really hard especially in a family setting, because if one of you kind of I'll let you get away with that. Oh, it's, the wave is like this instead of all the way. I mean, you've got to be so careful with that because then the person that's got the high criteria says, he's not doing it anymore. I don't understand why. Well, because little Jimmy came in and was going, oh yeah, you kind of went like this and waved, and that was good, and yeah, so that's important. So reinforce. We need to briefly touch on because again, this is a whole. We're not doing part three. Well, we could do part three, but it's the quadrants of operant conditioning. So positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, negative punishment. And people go, oh, punishment, oh, negative. And you have to kind of put everything you know about those words aside and look at it. The way I remember it being old, I need that mnemonic device is that it's like math, right? So it's positive, you're adding something, negative, you're taking something away, reinforcement, it increases the likelihood that a behavior will happen again, and punishment, it decreases the likelihood that a behavior will happen again.
Right,
Okay, go
right.
ahead.
And
Take
but
over
like
because I have
if you think about those two axes, instead of trying to remember each of the individual quadrants, it's usually a lot easier to do. It's
Mhm.
also important to remember that most trainers are going to move between different quadrants depending on what animal they're working with, where that animal is starting out. Um, Honestly, for a lot of people, positive punishment becomes the scariest thing because that's I'm adding something to the environment to decrease the likelihood that an animal performs a particular behavior again. And that's where you think about things like choke chains and shock collars. But it also is something as simple as I have a puppy right now. His name is Logan. He is adorable. That is part of why he is still alive, because he is an obnoxious little butthead. There is constant communication and correction with him. If he goes to chew on something that he's not supposed to, first of all, that part of that's my fault. I didn't set him up for success by removing everything that he could possibly chew on, but also it's impossible to remove everything from the environment. But
Mhm.
okay, he's teething. So if he goes to chew on a power cord, I'm going to go, ah, that's adding something to the environment, decreases the likelihood he's going to chew on that cord because maybe that was a little bit scary or maybe that got his attention. But then I'm immediately going to shift to he stopped chewing on it. He's focused on me. He's calm. Those are behaviors that I want to see again. So,
Mhm.
Bridge, good dog. Let me give him a toy that he can chew on, which that's
Mhm.
something that he wants. He's going to be interested in paying attention to me, listening to the feedback that I have for him. So now we have shifted from positive punishment to positive reinforcement.
Mhm.
It's all about how you apply those different aspects.
Right. And it happens pretty fluidly. And you can't, if you're thinking about it in your head that, oh, I'm in this, I'm doing this now, I'm doing this now, it's this now, it's this now, you're going to get all, I think you're going to trip over yourself and you're going to lose something in the training session because now you're fixating on where am I as far as operant conditioning is concerned. Um, and something as simple as a leash. So is Logan lead trained or no?
You were define trained.
Okay. So
Um,
you're working.
so
What's,
we are working
is
on
there?
it. Logan knows he's
Okay.
supposed to sit, be calm, to have his leash put on. He is supposed to stay with me when we go outside, but also there's a leaf and
Squirrel.
there's oh god, he loves squirrels. Um, so it is something we are constantly working on, providing him information, and
Right.
yeah.
But when you look at the way a leash works, if you pull on a leash, that's positive punishment because you are
Hmm.
adding that pressure. And so if you ever have this conversation with a horse person, that's just, I have had this go around. I can't tell you how many times that if you're giving a horse direction by pressing with one leg or the other in the saddle, then isn't that punishment because they're moving away from the I've had horse people say you can't do straight positive reinforcement training with a horse. And
Well,
if you break it down, I don't know.
and so this is where it gets a little bit complicated because behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's
Right.
going to be so many different variables that are happening. So okay, so I'm riding my horse, and this is how we're riding a horse so that it looks like I'm riding a horse on a camera. And the horse starts to veer this way, so I'm going to apply pressure.
Mhm.
Maybe I apply pressure with the reins, maybe I apply pressure with my foot. Me applying pressure is positive punishment. I am adding
Mhm.
something to the environment to decrease the behavior, in this case, wandering off the path. But as soon as
Mhm.
that animal corrects and it goes back on the path, I'm going to release that pressure. So
Mhm.
we're taking something away, so it's negative, we're increasing the likelihood of this behavior happening. So now we're at negative reinforcement from positive punishment, and we have shifted in a grand total of 3 seconds of just doing that.
Yeah. It's and I think that leashes and horseback riding are great examples of how that goes back and forth. Um, so
And I think
all right.
I think a really important thing, if you're recording your videos, if you're watching your videos, watch your videos and try to think through it after the fact. It is
Mhm.
going to help you be more confident with, hey, that's positive punishment, that's negative reinforcement, that's positive reinforcement. It is very, very challenging to do that while you're also focused on, okay, hey, there's a bird on my arm, and if I mess up, the bird's going to bite me. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
let's focus on having a positive training session, and then, reinforce your understanding of those concepts by rewatching your videos. It also means that you're going to be watching your videos, paying attention to you, to the animal. So you're going to benefit from that as well.
Yeah, and I think too, yeah, honestly, well, let me ask you, because I know the answer for me. Has
Uh-oh.
anyone ever asked you mid-training session where you were as far was it positive punishment? Was it negative? Has anybody ever asked you that? Don't tell
Yes.
me. Really? Because no one
Yes.
has ever asked me that. I mean,
Oh no,
we've
I
we've
have had that.
discussed.
I have had that while working. It's like, oh, hey, you wanted me to come out and work with your bird that is doing, all of these different things. And you're like, well, wait, should I use this, or do I use this, or do you do this? And I'm like, I really want to be focused on your bird right now, and not answering
Okay,
your
that's
question.
fair.
But
That's fair. But I mean, nobody like does anybody if okay, in a professional setting, if you're at work, does
oh,
your boss ever ask you like, "Hey, is that positive punishment, negative punishment, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement?"
I would, in a training session, no.
Right.
I would say working at a as a trainer at a zoo, one of the things that was really important is going through, and it's like, can you give me an example of positive reinforcement? Can you give me
Right.
an example of positive punishment? Um, of course, you then get into the questions of like, what are the potential complications of this? Positive
Mhm.
punishment potentially pulls from your relationship with that animal. You know, Positive reinforcement doesn't pull from your relationship from an animal. So that's
Mhm.
why it's usually recommended for brand new trainers. But no, there might have been questions after the fact of like, why
Right.
did you choose to do a particular thing? And that's another thing, because I have trained brand new trainers, and I say that when I'm working with a new trainer, it is teaching you the basics of how to drive. But if you want to drive because you want to get on the highway and you are confident in your ability to safely go down the highway to get to downtown and you're going to get there quickly, okay. If you say, I'm not as confident in my ability to go that speed, I want to take the side streets and it's going to take me a little longer, but we're not going 70 miles an hour and I feel safer, you still get to downtown. So that's a matter of personal choice as long as you can safely get to downtown.
Mhm. Well, that's like choosing to do the Rockstar Tour with Carrie Ellen driving. See, I know she's on vacation and she's not watching the live stream tonight. I hope she's not. But
Wait, does
anyway,
she take the
so
side streets or does she go 75 on the highway?
depends. Wait, yes. Was that not the answer you were looking for? Um,
Robin's like, she goes
so
75 on the side streets.
sometimes. Um, so all right, we this took us a little longer than I had anticipated on terminology, but I think it's good. But I don't want people to get hung up on, oh, that's a this or don't label just keep it in your head, know that it's there, know how to use it, and and don't get hung up on what are you calling it.
Yeah, part of why it's really important is if you need to be able to talk to somebody else about it, if you need to work on your plan, if you're not making progress and you need to reach out for maybe a behavioral consultant. Understanding those different aspects is going to be important for talking about that. But also, if you have to reach out to a behavior consultant, they'll help you understand, like, oh, here's what you're doing in that situation. Here, this is what this looks like. So yeah, focusing on those they can be very, very long definitions. They can be
Mhm.
very dry definitions because, I know a lot of people want, oh, what's reinforcer? Be like, oh, that's a good thing the animal likes. Be like, no, no, no. Technically, we need to understand it is something that increases the likelihood of a particular behavior reoccurring because of the nuance. You can't
Right.
guarantee the behavior and the choice aspect, but it it's not that there are people who there are farmers who have trained their dogs to do 9,000 different things
Yeah.
in the 1800s who were illiterate. Like it is the
Yeah.
consistency and the approach.
Right. And you can, and it's, what do the results look like? You know, all of the quadrants work at some point in time, but to say I'm only going to use one, or I'm never going to do this. Certain ones have more staying power, right? The behavior is going to be more vital and more, you know, you're going to get better duration as far as the behavior not breaking down with certain approaches. But that's going to become second nature as you train. It's really not something that anyone can teach you, I don't think. I think it's a matter of seeing how it works, getting into, a groove, for lack of a better term, figuring out how this works, and then figuring out again with another animal, because it's different for every animal.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are going to be aspects that you will try because you saw them work for other animals. A lot
Mhm.
of what I do with animal training is, oh, hey, I think I can do this because I've seen this animal do this, or this is a particular challenge I had with. Oh, this armadillo won't do this. Well, I've also worked with a porcupine or a pelican that was also skittish, and here were things that we had to do, and break down these approximations to deal with a skittish animal, whereas a more assertive animal may not have those issues. Breaking things down in terms of size, but
Mhm.
also using, oh, hey, here's something that works really well for a parakeet, but I can scale this up and now it's going to work really well for a macaw. It's the same idea. There's so much you can use and borrow, and you are going to learn so much from working with the animals, but you don't do that unless you actually start working with them.
Right. Absolutely. So, couple of behaviors that we wanted to talk about. We've got like 8 minutes. Ready, go.
Oh,
No, there might have to be a part three. Um, we wanted to talk about step up.
okay.
Um, and I feel like Nick's giving us the hook. No, these are the tour rescues up on top. But do you want to get into the behaviors, Jack, or it's up to you?
Yeah, I think we can do these basic behaviors. And just real quickly, no matter where your animal is starting, if there is any behavior your animal is doing, if you can cue a behavior, get the behavior, reinforce the behavior, you are increasing the likelihood that you will be successful with every other
Mhm.
behavior that they are working on. I think step up is one of the main ones that people think of when it comes to parrots. Um,
Mhm.
but there are so many different aspects that go into it, so many different ways that you can do it.
And I think too, just to go back for 1 second, when you said, if you've trained a behavior, you've gotten the behavior, it doesn't just stay though. It's not magical
Right.
that once you train a behavior, you're good, right? Oh, he knows how to do that. I'm good. You have to keep reinforcing that behavior. You have to keep with, you want to increase the likelihood that it will continue. You can't just think, oh, I'm done. This is great.
Well, and I think step up is actually one of those behavior that can fall into that as a bit of a problem because people start assuming, oh, well, the bird knows how to step up. I just do a step up. And, maybe the reinforcement is, hey, a little head scratch because you like tactile reinforcement. Maybe it's like the smallest treat item. It could be, hey, you step up to go to your perch in the living room, which is exciting, and you get to see people. Well, that's a
Right.
reinforcer. But if the step up is to go into your crate because we're going to the vet, that is not necessarily reinforcing, because then scary things happen because you stepped up. You didn't have anything to increase the likelihood of you wanting to step up.
Right. And I think too, if you have to keep reinforcing that, because would you stop going to work if you weren't getting paid? I would. I
Absolutely.
mean, if all of a sudden it was like, oh, you come to work every day, I don't have to pay you anymore. No, that's not how this works. And, we expect our animals, oh, well, he knows how to step up. I don't have to reinforce step up anymore. He's really good at it. That's crazy. That's like saying, oh, you've become an executive in our company. We're not going to pay you anymore.
Right.
That's not how this works. So we've got to remember. So step up, I think it could be with your hand, it could be with a stick, it could be, and you want to make sure you're training every iteration of it, whether it's, to the crate, to the perch, to the just coming out and going back in. All those different forms of step up, you got to keep practicing all of them.
Right.
Yeah, Melissa, and we were going to talk about this. Melissa said Zorro steps backwards, and there are certain birds that's what they do, and that's what they're more comfortable with, and you'll be able to read that almost instantly.
Yeah, and I mean, and that can
Um,
be for any number of reasons, especially if you have older geriatric birds. Maybe they have issues with arthritis. If you have more skittish birds, maybe they want to step backwards because they want to still be watching you. And if they have to turn around away from you, maybe that's untrustworthy to them. Maybe that's just the way that they were trained to do it, and that's what they are used to. Um,
yeah.
it all depends. There's nothing wrong with if your bird steps up onto a stick. In fact, I think a lot of people are more confident with that because there's not a risk of you getting bit if your bird steps up onto a perch.
Right. So Jane says there was a lot of chatter about step up in my house this past week. Fortunately, all human phalanges are still intact and accounted for. Oh, because Jane had her surgery, so other people were stepping up her birds. That's yeah. So there we go. These are people that may not know the nuances of Jane's step up technique. So you gotta be on your toes and know, or on your toe. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I was going to try to be cute there, but it's not going to happen. But, uh, I know people, Carrie Ellen has a blind bird that is absolutely more comfortable stepping backwards. And when
Mm-hmm.
you try to step her up forwards, you bleed. That's just the way it goes. And it's, I don't know exactly what the reason is, but that's just what happens.
And
Um,
I think just addressing that and tailoring that to your individual bird is what's important. Again, observing your bird, learning, but also try to think through ways that you can problem solve this. Like if you're getting bit by your bird every single time you try to get them to step up forwards, maybe they need to step up backwards. Maybe you need to just work on relationship building with them. Maybe they need to work on stepping up to a perch. Again, the good thing is because you are learning to be the driver, you can decide the route to get you to downtown. Um, I got to go and work with some of the birds at Magnolia Exotic Bird Sanctuary, and one of them they had there, it was a blind macaw, and we were going through different things, and they're saying, oh, but we can't really give that bird any toys because it's blind. And I'm like, well, no, 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 like there's challenges and there's things we need to keep in mind, and I would want to keep the perching similar, but this can be really enforcing if we think it through and we come up with a plan. There was the toy had like crinkle paper and cups, so it made some noise. The bird, like, I it was hung up so the bird wasn't going to trip over it. We thought through everything for safety. The bird immediately started going, shredding, playing. Two of their volunteers started crying because they didn't think they would see anything like that. And if you have a plan and you think through things, And sometimes you're going to be like, I thought through everything and I was wrong. I missed a variable or I was just wrong. But if you're willing to do that, this applies to enrichment, to training, to everything you are doing with the animal. You are going to have a better time. The animal is going to have a better time. It's going to be so much better.
Definitely. And we're going to Magnolia on the Rockstar tour this year. So
Okay.
I'm excited. I don't know if that bird's still there, but it'd be fun. So step up, we've talked about target training as well is very useful. So step up is like the gateway to so many other things. And so is target training, in my opinion. If you can get a bird to target train, now you can move that bird anywhere. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's a rough day, if it's in this middle of hormone season, it doesn't matter because you've built that relationship through target training. And now you can move that bird anywhere, hands off, or that animal anywhere, hands off. And then step up is kind of the next place you go, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would say, you can basically tier it. I would usually start with something like recall training just because it's probably the easiest, the gentlest. That's, coming when I call you. If you have a brand new bird, that's going to start with, if I call you by your name, do you give any sign of recognition? Do you turn your head to look at me? Maybe that's worthy of reinforcement, depending on where we are with our behavioral criteria. Y'all like how we're just going to be slipping in the training terminology? So it'll be fun. But then, from there, we can look to something like stationing. So going to a particular place, a particular perch, especially if you have an animal. Hormonal birds can be one of the ones that are a little bit scary. Nesting birds, people don't want to reach into a cage. If you know they're going to be on this perch on this side of the cage, you can change this food bowl without worrying that the bird's going to bite you while you're doing that.
Right. And I think too, that so stationing a bird, a recall training, or sending a bird to another location, whether you're sending a bird to a perch if it's a flighted bird. Most of those are hands off. If it's not a flighted bird, they're going to have to walk across the floor.
I've seen that too.
Yeah, right. But there it's less intrusive. If you're working with a new bird and you're not sure, or the bird's not sure of you, then start with those kind of hands-off behaviors that can remain hands-off. And then as you build that relationship, you add in the things where they're, landing on you or they're stepping up on you.
Right. And always try to see it from your animal's point of view. Like, you may think, hey, I'm just asking you to step up. That's not that big a deal. But your hands might be bigger than the bird that you are having step up onto your hands. Maybe that's a really scary thing. Crate training is one where a lot of people can get into trouble because the crate becomes scary. I've seen so
Mhm.
many birds where you get the bird into the crate the first time and you're so excited. You shut the door and there's a noise and now the bird's locked in. And that bird is going to take a lot of work to willingly go into that crate again.
Yeah.
Um, but if
And,
you work so it's not
I mean,
scary.
yeah, and where there's choice. So, like with crate training, one of the things I like to do is allow that door to stay open. And if you shut it a little bit, shut it a little bit, but they can still open it. So you're not going to shut them in, lock it. I mean, unless this is an emergency, and then we're not really doing a training session. We're evacuating or whatever.
Right. And I think you're pointing out the different approximations you would use for crate training of and you may get to a point where you realize with your bird, like, we can't even start by going into the crate because you're scared of the crate. Maybe we need to start with, will you step up with on my hand with the crate on the table? And then can we
Right.
get a little closer but not touch it? I think understanding that you may need to adjust those approximations depending on your animal is important. I think you also hinted on a really important part. We're going to use training to try to make our care as easy as possible, but there are going to be times where you may need to step out of that. If there's a tornado coming and I have 5 minutes to get everything and hunker down in the basement, which I don't know anything about that because I'm in Houston and we have no basements here. We're we're like 40 feet above sea level. Like, but I understand the concept. If you
Right.
need to get into the basement so the tornado doesn't take you out, you can repair that relationship. You can work on bridge conditioning. I always recommend to people, if you're working on training with your animal, periodically just go back to bridge conditioning. Go back to good, here's a reinforcer. Good, here's a reinforcer. You're not asking anything. You are maxing out the value of that bridge, which is going to decline naturally as you're working with the animal. So give it a little boost.
And it's good to have that win, that very positive, that that, okay, he's got it down. This is working. This is, we're having some good success here. Keep that momentum going by maybe throwing in a very easy one. And Nick says his birds are stick trained. What are you giggling about?
So I have
No?
a story that goes with that actually. Um,
Well, so
I
just Nick, just real quick, Nick says that his
yeah.
birds are stick trained because when people come to take care of them and somebody gets out and it's scary for them, for the
No, and
bird
I
and
think
the
that is wonderful planning, and you are prepared for that scenario. So my friend Danny has a scarlet macaw named Wancho that has the typical temperament of a scarlet macaw. And so for that reason, if there is somebody else that needs to take care of, it's usually me, because he is confident that I can take care of it. And other
Mhm.
people cannot, because it reacts like a scarlet macaw. It has opinions and it has a large can opener on its face.
Mhm.
So I can stay calm in that situation, but not everyone has a me in that situation. So planning to be able to
Everyone
go
needs
out of
to go ahead, sorry. So planning, so Danny
yeah,
plans
that,
that you
that
will be
planning is so incredible. I think what are the things that you can do, and that's kind of the whole point of this, like getting your animal ready for, hey, if I crate train you, going into the crate isn't scary if we need to evacuate, if we need to go to the vet, if we want to go visit grandma. Stepping up onto a stick. Some birds, they might be scared of learning how to step up onto a stick, and that could be for any number of reasons. Maybe they had a perch in their cage that came loose. They stepped up onto it, and the whole thing fell down. Now they're scared that if I step on that, I'm going to fall down. Like, every bird is a unique set of challenges. You are going to. Frank says his Scarlet chases his wife down the hallway.
so Frank, did you train that behavior or, because I'm gonna have to do a report here or something. I don't know.
I was working on a construction project. I think I was putting together a bookshelf. I dropped one of the shelves. It made a noise. Mika, my umbrella cockatoo, got startled. Um, I was the cause of the noise, so I was the scary thing. So he is
Mhm.
on the ground. He went running to my partner Justin, and Justin was like, "Am I going to get?" And I'm like, "No, no, no. You're fine. You're fine. He's going to you to save him because I made a scary noise." So I'm like, "Just stay still, be calm," and he's going to go right up to you. Mika stepped up onto his foot and like leaned against his leg. And I'm like, yeah, now that he knows he's safe, reach down, step up. He's like, Mika cuddled into him. He's like, please save me. He made a big
Mhm.
noise. And then
There you
everything was fine.
And I can attest to the fact that Mika is, your relationship has not suffered because there was that one breach of trust. So, yeah.
and
Um,
and Mika is I mean, you were at Parrot Festival and we did a little bit with two umbrella cockatoos. And you got to see the very, very different approach to both of them. And they're
mhm,
both good birds. Um, and there were different aspects. I know you were working on target training, which Grayson used to know how to do, and he would target with his beak. And then you wanted to try it with Mika, and I'm like, Mika's probably going to try to grab with his foot. Mika has a
mhm.
scissor beak. He's not as inclined to try to touch things with his beak, and he did it instantly, which made me feel good because I'm like, hey, I do pay attention and file away these
Yeah.
observations to use for later.
And we were willing to modify that, what we were asking for, because it was we knew that would be easier for Mika. So we adapted because we knew that asking for one behavior that was not necessarily comfortable for him was what we
Right.
needed to do. So,
Right. And,
all right,
do you take a look at it and see, hey, what is the easier thing here? Maybe it's not I'm getting the behavior that I had in my mind, but am I getting a behavior that works? Am I getting a behavior that builds a relationship, builds confidence with my bird? Again, just because the bird down the street targets by touching its beak to a target doesn't mean yours has to, as long as you have an understanding and a plan of why you're doing what you're doing.
right, right. All right. We've done it. We've talked for another hour, and still not finished everything. But I want to thank you, Jack. It's always a pleasure. And hopefully this helps people. Again, know the terminology in the back of your head, but don't let it consume you while you're trying to do your training sessions. It's just not. It's not going to do anybody any good. So, all right. I will see you. Well, I'll see you in August at AFA, maybe.
Woo! Yes, because I'm speaking at AFA and you're speaking at AFA
I'm speaking at AFA. So, and who else is
and
speaking
Danny's
at AFA?
speaking at
Danny's
AFA.
speaking. And Nick will be at AFA. So, all the cool kids are going to be at AFA. So,
Oh, and
um,
I do have to point out, just because I will otherwise get yelled at. So I'm really, really excited for AFA this year because the keynote speaker, you
yes.
know,
Da-da-da.
because if we don't mention this, we're both going to get yelled at. Um,
We are. And I was thinking that. So, um, it's a pretty amazing keynote speaker.
mhm.
Um, I will say that. Do you want to announce who the keynote is for AFA this year?
Yeah, so the keynote speaker for this year is going to be Georgia Hayes. She is the current president of the National Parrot Foundation, current first vice president of the American Federation of Aviculture. Georgia has worked with rescue birds. She has worked with um, so many different aspects of each of those organizations. But I think one of the coolest things that, and it's probably Georgia's greatest strength, which I am example of. Georgia is excellent at coordinating and organizing what is needed to move aviculture forward. So, she might volunteer you for things, she might tell you to do things,
Mhm.
but no, like the things that she has accomplished, pushed organizations to those next levels, is really, really incredible. So I'm excited to see her speak.
She's also, if anybody's ever gone to AFA in recent years, she is also the conference speaker chairperson. So that's really why Jack and I are being so nice because we want to speak at AFA. Not Absolutely not true, but all right. Have a great week, Jack. Everybody else, have a great week and enjoy your birds. Do some training, collect some dandelions. Thank you, Nick, as always. And we will see you soon, Jack. Take care. Bye bye, guys.